Don't chase happiness, build inner strength. The modern world speaks endlessly about happiness. It treats happiness as something to be found, achieved, or captured, as if it were an object waiting at the end of the right career, relationship, or lifestyle. This pursuit is constant and exhausting. It trains the mind to scan for pleasure and flee from discomfort, leaving people restless even when their lives appear full. Stoicism begins from a quieter and more demanding position. It does not promise happiness as a permanent state. It does not tell you how to feel good. Instead, it asks a harder question: how strong is your inner life when circumstances refuse to cooperate? The Stoic does not deny pleasure or reject joy, but refuses to depend on them. Emotional states rise and fall according to events, health, fortune, and other people's behavior. Building a life around them is unstable by design. Strength, by contrast, is something that can be cultivated deliberately. It does not require perfect conditions. It grows through discipline, clarity, and acceptance of reality as it is. Many people today feel overwhelmed, not because life is uniquely cruel, but because they have been taught to expect constant comfort. When discomfort arrives, it feels like failure. When uncertainty appears, it feels intolerable. Stoicism offers no escape from these facts of life. It offers orientation. Inner strength is the ability to remain grounded when the world shifts. It is the capacity to think clearly when emotions surge, to act according to principle when impulses pull elsewhere, and to endure loss without surrendering dignity. This strength does not make life painless, it makes it manageable. This is not a philosophy of withdrawal or indifference. It is a philosophy of engagement without dependence. It teaches how to stand firmly within yourself, regardless of what unfolds around you. The mistake most people make is assuming that happiness is the natural reward for arranging life correctly. If the job improves, if the relationship stabilizes, if recognition arrives, then calm will follow. This belief quietly places your inner state in the hands of chance. It teaches the mind to wait, to bargain with the future, and to remain unsettled in the present. Stoic thinkers rejected this arrangement entirely. They observed that life does not move in straight lines, and that fortune has no obligation to cooperate. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still lost children, faced betrayal, and endured war and illness. Seneca was wealthy and influential, yet lived under constant political threat. Epictetus began life enslaved and physically injured. None of them treated happiness as something to be secured from the outside. They treated strength of judgment as the foundation of a stable life. The Stoic distinction between what is within your control and what is not a motivational slogan. It is a practical boundary. Your opinions, intentions, choices, and responses are yours to govern. Outcomes, other people's behavior, reputation, health fluctuations, and luck are not. Anxiety grows when this boundary is ignored. Anger grows when it is violated repeatedly. Much modern distress comes from demanding control when none is possible. Chasing happiness intensifies this confusion. When feeling good becomes the goal, every obstacle feels personal. A delayed plan becomes an injustice. Criticism becomes an attack on identity. Uncertainty becomes a threat rather than a condition of life. Emotional reactions begin to rule decisions. Reason is sidelined, not because people lack intelligence, but because they have trained themselves to obey feelings as if feelings were reliable guides. Stoicism does not suppress emotion. It refuses to obey it blindly. Emotions are seen as signals shaped by judgment. Change the judgment, and the emotion changes with it. This requires patience and repetition, not force. When something goes wrong, the Stoic asks not how to escape the feeling, but whether the interpretation of the event is accurate, useful, and aligned with reality. Modern life amplifies emotional volatility. News cycles are designed to provoke fear and outrage. Social media encourages comparison and performance. Work culture rewards urgency and visibility over depth and steadiness. Under these conditions, a mind trained to chase happiness becomes increasingly fragile. It depends on approval, stimulation, and constant reassurance. Inner strength moves in the opposite direction. It reduces dependency. It simplifies the mental economy. Instead of asking whether an event feels good or bad, the Stoic asks whether a response is reasonable, proportionate, and consistent with virtue. This shift alone lowers anxiety. It restores agency. Reason, in Stoic terms, is not cold logic, detached from life. It is the faculty that allows you to see events clearly, without exaggeration or distortion. It keeps temporary discomfort from becoming a permanent narrative. It prevents one loss from defining an entire identity. It allows a person to endure uncertainty without inventing catastrophes to fill the silence. Many people believe that strength requires constant effort or rigidity. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Strength is built through alignment, not tension. When expectations match reality, resistance decreases. When you stop demanding that life feel a certain way, energy becomes available for action instead of complaint. This does not mean lowering standards or abandoning ambition. It means anchoring ambition in what you can actually shape. A Stoic works diligently, but accepts that results are never guaranteed. This acceptance does not weaken effort. It purifies it. Action becomes quieter, steadier, less desperate. When inner strength replaces happiness as the aim, emotional life becomes less chaotic. Joy still appears, but it is welcomed without clinging. Pain still arrives, but it is faced without panic. The mind learns to recover faster, because it has not been trained to interpret every fluctuation as a crisis. The Stoics understood that stability is not a gift bestowed by favorable conditions. It is a skill developed through practice. Every irritation, delay, and disappointment becomes an opportunity to reinforce this skill, not by pretending it does not hurt, but by refusing to let pain dictate character. In a world that encourages constant reaction, inner strength allows pause. In a culture that measures worth by visibility and applause, it allows quiet self-respect. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply endures. This is why Stoicism does not promise happiness. Happiness is too dependent on variables you do not command. Inner strength is not. It grows slowly through attention, restraint, and honest self-examination. Once established, it becomes the ground from which a calm life can emerge, regardless of what the world decides to do next. Suffering enters every life without asking permission. It does not wait for readiness, fairness, or understanding. The Stoics did not treat this as a tragedy of existence, but as one of its defining conditions. To expect a life free from hardship is to prepare the mind for constant disappointment. To accept hardship as inevitable is to remove its power to surprise and overwhelm. Much suffering is intensified by resistance. The mind insists that what is happening should not be happening. It compares reality to an imagined alternative and declares the difference unbearable. Stoicism does not eliminate pain, but it challenges this added layer of mental struggle. When an event is outside your control, refusing to accept it only multiplies distress. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is not approval. It is recognition. Hardship, for the Stoic, functions as training, not because suffering is good in itself, but because character is revealed and shaped under pressure. Comfort tests nothing. Ease demands little. Difficulty exposes habits of thought that remain invisible during calm periods. Anger, fear, envy, and despair do not arrive randomly. They emerge from unexamined judgments. Hardship brings those judgments into view. Desire is one of the primary sources of inner disturbance. The stronger the attachment to specific outcomes, the greater the vulnerability to disappointment. Modern life amplifies this through constant messaging about what one should want, own, or become. Success is presented as a narrow script, and deviation from it feels like failure. Stoicism resists this by narrowing desire itself. It encourages wanting less, but wanting wisely. Attachment is not limited to possessions or status. It extends to reputation, being right, being admired, and being seen as virtuous. The ego forms subtle contracts with the world, expecting recognition in exchange for effort. When recognition does not come, resentment follows. The Stoic dissolves these contracts by acting according to principle rather than expectation. The action becomes complete in itself. Social pressure is one of the most underestimated forces shaping behavior. Many people live not according to reason, but according to the imagined gaze of others. Decisions are filtered through fear of judgment, exclusion, or irrelevance. Stoicism restores independence by reminding the individual that approval is not a reliable measure of worth. It fluctuates with trends, moods, and misunderstandings. Character does not. Injustice presents a particular challenge. Being wronged triggers a powerful desire for retaliation or validation. The Stoics did not deny the reality of injustice, but they refused to let it corrupt the inner life. To respond unjustly to injustice is to double its reach. Self-command in these moments preserves dignity. It does not excuse wrongdoing, but it prevents the wrong from spreading inward. Fate, in Stoic philosophy, is not a mystical force, but the total chain of causes that brought the present moment into being. Resisting fate means wishing reality were other than it is. Aligning with fate means working with what exists, rather than exhausting oneself, fighting it. This alignment creates calm, not because life becomes easier, but because effort becomes more intelligent. Voluntary restraint is a practical tool the Stoics used to weaken fear of loss. By occasionally choosing less comfort, less stimulation, and less convenience, the mind learns that deprivation is survivable. Fear loses its leverage. When external conditions worsen, the individual is not shocked into panic. They have already rehearsed simplicity. Modern environments rarely encourage restraint. Excess is normalized. Discomfort is framed as a problem to be eliminated immediately. Under these conditions, even minor disruptions feel intolerable. Stoic practice reverses this fragility by exposing the mind to manageable difficulty on its own terms. Strength grows through familiarity, not avoidance. Emotional mastery does not mean emotional numbness. It means understanding the sequence from judgment to feeling to action. When this sequence becomes visible, choice re-enters the process. You may still feel anger, but you are no longer compelled to act it out. You may feel fear, but you are not forced to surrender to it. Through this discipline, suffering loses its ability to define identity. It becomes an event rather than a verdict. Pain arrives, does its work, and passes. What remains is not bitterness, but clarity. The individual becomes less reactive, less dependent, and more resilient. Stoicism does not promise relief from life's weight. It teaches how to carry it without collapse. That capacity, once developed, cannot be taken away by fortune, opinion, or circumstance. It belongs to the individual alone, and it changes the entire posture with which life is met. Impermanence is not a distant philosophical idea. It is active in every moment, quietly undoing what was just established. Bodies age, circumstances shift, relationships change, and plans dissolve. Much anxiety comes from treating temporary arrangements as if they were stable. The Stoics confronted impermanence directly, not to create despair, but to sharpen perception. Remembering that everything changes clarifies what deserves attention. When time is understood as limited, trivial conflicts lose urgency, grudges feel heavy and unproductive, excessive worry about status or recognition appears misaligned with reality. The awareness of impermanence does not drain life of meaning, it concentrates it. Mortality plays a similar role. The Stoics reflected on death not as a morbid fixation, but as a corrective to confusion. When death is ignored, priorities drift. Energy is spent preserving appearances and postponing decision. When death is acknowledged, attention returns to what can be lived fully and honorably now. This reflection steadies the mind. It reduces fear by making limits explicit rather than imagined. The present moment, for the Stoic, is the only place where action is possible. Regret ties the mind to what cannot be altered. Anxiety projects it into futures that may never arrive. Neither state improves judgment. Attention to the present does not require constant calm or forced positivity. It requires noticing what is actually happening without embellishment or escape. Modern life encourages distraction as a default response to discomfort. When silence appears, it is filled immediately. When difficulty arises, it is numbed. This constant avoidance weakens attention. Stoic practice restores it gradually. The mind learns to stay with experience long enough to understand it. Clarity replaces agitation, not through suppression, but through familiarity. Habits of thought determine emotional stability more than events themselves. Repeated interpretations harden into reflexes. A person who habitually assumes insult will find hostility everywhere. A person who expects catastrophe will experience constant tension. Stoicism interrupts these habits by introducing deliberate examination. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every feeling deserves obedience. Living according to virtue rather than mood is central to this discipline. Moods fluctuate unpredictably. They respond to sleep, health, weather, and countless variables outside control. Virtue is steadier. It refers to qualities such as honesty, courage, fairness, and self-restraint. Acting from these qualities creates consistency. It allows a person to recognize themselves across changing circumstances. Inner strength expresses itself quietly in daily decisions. Choosing restraint when excess is available. Choosing patience when irritation would be easier. Choosing honesty when distortion would bring advantage. These choices rarely attract attention. They are often invisible, yet over time, they shape character more reliably than dramatic gestures ever could. Being reliable to oneself is a form of freedom. When actions align with considered values, self-respect grows. This self-respect does not depend on praise or validation. It survives criticism and misunderstanding. The individual becomes less reactive because fewer inner conflicts demand resolution. Strength, in the Stoic sense, is not hardness. It is flexibility without collapse. It allows adjustment without self-betrayal. When plans fail, direction remains. When losses occur, identity endures. The individual is not reduced to circumstances. This strength also brings a quieter relationship with others. Expectations soften. The need to control or impress diminishes. Compassion becomes possible without entanglement. The Stoic can care without clinging, help without rescuing, and disagree without hostility. Freedom emerges gradually from this posture, not the freedom to do whatever one wants, but the freedom from compulsion. Freedom from needing life to follow a particular script. Freedom from being governed by impulse, fear, or approval. This is not a final state to be achieved. It is a practice maintained through attention and repetition. There are setbacks. Old habits return under stress. Stoicism does not treat this as failure, but as part of training. Each moment offers another chance to respond deliberately. Over time, the internal environment stabilizes. External chaos does not disappear, but it loses its authority. The individual becomes less impressed by extremes, less shaken by noise, and more grounded in judgment. This is the quiet promise of Stoicism, not happiness as an emotional peak, but strength as a foundation. A life oriented toward clarity rather than comfort, toward steadiness rather than stimulation, toward inner order in a disordered world. The idea that life should feel good most of the time has quietly misled many people. It has encouraged avoidance of discomfort rather than development of capacity. Stoicism offers a different aim. It does not ask you to chase happiness or suppress pain. It asks you to become strong enough that neither governs you. Inner strength is not built in isolation from life. It is shaped in ordinary moments through choices that often go unnoticed. It grows when you respond rather than react, when you accept what cannot be changed and direct effort toward what can. Over time, this discipline creates steadiness, not because life becomes predictable, but because your relationship to it becomes clearer. Calm, in this view, is not something you pursue directly. It emerges as a byproduct of alignment, when judgment is grounded in reality, when desire is restrained, and when action follows principle rather than impulse. The mind settles naturally. There is less internal friction, less need to escape or prove something. This path is not quick, and it is not comfortable in the way modern culture promises comfort. It requires attention, patience, and honesty with oneself, but it offers something more durable than fleeting happiness. It offers freedom from being constantly pulled apart by circumstances. Stoicism does not promise a life without loss, fear, or uncertainty. It offers a way to meet these conditions without surrendering dignity or direction. Strength becomes a companion rather than a performance. It supports you quietly, even when no one is watching. If this perspective resonates, stay with it. Reflection, repetition, and practice matter more than inspiration. This channel exists as a place to return to these ideas, to examine them calmly, and to apply them without noise or exaggeration. You do not need to feel better immediately. You need to become steadier. That work unfolds over time, through understanding and restraint. Continue walking that path deliberately, and let inner strength, not the pursuit of happiness, shape the life you build.